as Tom said, I'm James, moving back up to Norwich after studying at UEA, so kind of practicing this talk, to introduce myself to you lot, and hopefully point to see some more of each other, and also because I'm doing this talk at Digital Shoreditch in Norwich, in London, to a lot more people, so if I embarrass myself here, it's kind of a better starting ground than in front of a few thousand people. So, what are we talking about? We're talking about inclusive design, but as Tom alluded to earlier, we're talking about how we can use that as a tool to get buy-in for UX in our organisations. So I'm going to assume most of you know what UX is, but essentially how I'm talking about it, it's user-driven insights to inform a design process. I'm also talking about it in the built environment context rather than digital, which is a bit unusual in the UX world, but we're rolling with it. So at the moment I work at Imagination, which is a multinational digital experience agency, and my main work is based around Ford. So we design their global Autoshow program. So any car show for Ford that's quite large is what we're doing. So we're designing them, we're building them, we're managing them all the way through. So this talk isn't a what is UX talk. It's also not really a what is inclusive design talk. I'm talking about a process that I went through to win UX buy-in in my organisation. So this is really just talking about a case study. And hopefully, if you're having similar problems, it might inspire you in a way that you can kind of move forward a bit. So the problem, this is the situation I was kind of facing. So I'm the UX chap. I think UX is brilliant. I think we should speak to our users all the time before we design something. I think that's where the best insights come from. However, we've got our stakeholders. So we've got our design team, we've got our account team, we've got our business managers who all love UX. They think it's a great idea in principle. But when it comes to things like expense, the additional time on a project, the hassle involved, or the good, it's good enough already, we've been doing this a really long time, UX kind of slips down the pathway. So I'm the evangelist. Guys, this is amazing. But there's a lot of other things that these guys are having to think about. So the question is, how can I inspire them to feel about UX in the same way that I do? So facing comments like this, because you've been doing something a long time, doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best way to do it. So in my head, there's a lot of problems like I've just alluded to, the money, etc. But one of the key ones that I kind of felt was it's really easy to see yourself as a user. If you use an app, you can see yourself as a user. And if you see yourself as a user, why do you need to do the research? Because if you think it's good, why doesn't everybody think it's good? So a really nice example is this National Rail Enquires app. So it's one of my favourite apps. I'm sure a lot of you have used it too. It's got a really nice feature of you can set an alarm 5 minutes or 10 minutes before your station. So you fall asleep, it's going to wake you up. Amazing feature. All three of our stakeholders could have used this app every single day when they're commuting. But unless you're the user that falls asleep quite easily on the train, that feature is never going to occur to you. It's only by going out and speaking to users and going, oh, I always fall asleep on the train, it's rubbish, that you get that kind of insight. So it's a really nice example of actually research is really important. So how does inclusive design fit into this? So as I'm going to talk about in a second, I'm talking about the built environment. So if you can push your design team or your account team out of their comfort zone, then you're forcing them to see the benefit of research. So inclusive design in this context, we're talking about elderly people, we're talking about disabled people. So inclusive design, as a quick definition, because a lot of people haven't come across this term, and I hadn't until a few months ago. So inclusive design, essentially, it's about making your products and services appeal to your edge groups. The key being that if you appeal to your edge groups, things tend to be better for everybody else. And I've got a series of examples after this, which hopefully gets the message across. So it's not just, it's a great thing to do. We can all sit here and go, yeah, that's brilliant. We should definitely include everyone possible who we can. There's also business reasons for this. So 50% of the world has a disability. as some form, whether it's a visible disability or a disability you can't see. And by 2015, we're looking at 20% of the world's population being over 60. So this makes business sense as well as moral and ethical sense. And we'll see this here. So this is a jug designed by Oxo Good Grips, a company founded on making inclusive products. This is one of my favourite products. It's a jug, and it was designed with elderly people in mind, or people who couldn't bend down to see what was in a jug. They came up with the idea of using this slanted measuring, so you pour in and you can see from the top how full it is and what the measurement is. Designed for people with bad backs and elderly people, better for every single person that uses it. This is a little soap dispenser for people with poor hand dexterity and poor hand strength, so you can use various appendages to dispense your soap. Actually better for everyone than fiddling with bottles of shampoo with wet, slippery hands. This is a magnetic clasp for a necklace or a bracelet, designed for people with poor hand dexterity initially, but actually better for most people because those clasps are difficult for everybody to use. It's a little bathroom set here, which is designed with elderly people in mind, so you can raise and lower the seat of the sink. Actually, better for your edge case users, better for really tall people, better for really short people as well. And finally, the Herman Miller chair. Herman Miller chair that was originally designed, the initial concept for this came from Herman Miller going to an elderly care home, and he noticed that elderly people tend to sit in chairs quite a lot of the time all the day, developing pressure sores, poor air circulation around the bottom of their legs. He was like, why don't we make a chair with a net fabric? And if it's net, it's going to allow air to circulate, but it's also going to allow pressure to be spread evenly across the base of their thighs. The only reason this was never an elderly person's chair is because there's no market to sell stylish furniture to elderly people. So they ended up making the office chair, which is now one of the most famous office chairs in the world, and he made quite a lot of money from it. So it wasn't that bad after all. So putting this into practice, we need to find our edge case group. We need to conduct some research, ideally cheap research, good value research, and identify your inclusive gaps, trademark, and then present back to your teams in an innovative way. So I'm going to talk about a case study now, which I did, which kind of sums this up. So as I said earlier, I work on Autoshows. So even if you've never been to a car show, you can imagine what it's like. Lots of cars, lots of big expensive stands, lots of people, hostesses, etc. And I kind of asked myself, who's the edge case user here? And actually, it's probably disabled people, because people with disabilities, thinking about wheelchair users especially, cars are an essential part of their life. Most of us could get into any car and drive it, but if you're in a manual wheelchair, you've got to look how high the seat is before you can scoot yourself over. You've got to see if you can swing the chair behind you to put on the back seat. So this is a really engaged group of people who they need to physically try a car before they can buy it. So you've got a lot of people going, you've got an engaged group of people. This is a really important edge case, and it's kind of a group which not really any auto manufacturer is kind of appealing to very much. So this research was me and a lovely woman called Rebecca, who permanently uses a wheelchair, and we went to the Paris Auto Show last year, and we did some research. And now it is movie time. So there is a full-length video. It's about 4 minutes long. It's got a jointed ukulele soundtrack. It's really nice to watch. I'm not going to show it now, though, because your time is very valuable. And if you want to watch it, you can see it on my website, or I've just tweeted the link to it as well. If you want to follow me on Twitter, James Asterix. So watch it later in your own time. It's better if you watch it in your own time anyway. That's what it was designed for. So I do, however, have this, which is without the jointed soundtrack and is a lot shorter. So I'm going to talk about it. Go Vimeo. I do have it on a USB stick for this eventuality. Okay. So this is what happens when you don't have a HD film and you put it on a screen which is the size of a house. So excuse the blurriness. Vimeo, don't let me down. You're not YouTube. Yes. Okay, good. So this is us leaving St Pancras. The whole point of this exercise was to look at the entire journey. So we were thinking, it's not just the auto show we're looking at. If someone's made the effort to go to an auto show, especially the UK when there isn't really a big one anymore, their journey is really important because they have a really bad journey and they get to our stand and have a really bad time. That's not doing great things for the brand image. So Eurostar was the first challenge. So there's only a certain number of seats for wheelchairs, space on the Eurostar for wheelchairs, and they fill it really quickly. So it's not just you can get your last minute Eurostar. You're planning really far ahead to do this kind of trip. The next thing we found was accessible taxis. You have no idea how lucky we are in London. Every taxi is accessible, not in Paris. This was a lot of Googling, a lot of GCSE French trying to book the taxi, but it worked eventually. But again, these things take a lot of effort and a lot of planning. So before Rebecca, if this was a normal trip for Rebecca, she's already had a lot of effort to even get to our stand already. So this is the exhibition space, the exhibition hall, designed a really long time ago, probably an old industrial park or something. So there's no drop curbs anywhere. It's really difficult to get in. There's a special entrance for press and staff if you ever go, and it's up 6 steps because, of course, no member of the press has any form of disability. So that was that. And then we're kind of going to move on to our stand itself. So one of the things we found was the main way people kind of got onto the stand, as we shall see in a second, is from this direction. In the planning stage, we didn't really realise this because we designed this side of the stand so this was at the side. Turned out that the way the hall was laid out, there was an aisle which thousands of people walked down. As they walked down the aisle, they ended up here facing this. So it was the natural progression to walk onto the stand. But in the design process, we didn't really realise that. So most people, like 80% of the people were heading onto the stand this way. But if you're in a wheelchair, all you're faced with is a curb, which would have been fine, but the ramp was at the front of the stand, which is halfway down there, and there was no signage. So as you'll see in the video, if you watch it, you'll see Becca kind of heading down, hoping there's a ramp down there because there's no signage to direct her. So that was a really interesting learning as well. So then we kind of skipped through a couple of other things. So our hostesses turned out to be really good, really engaging, really knew about the cars. This was some screen content, which is quite interesting. So the screen's kind of inset into the table, which meant Rebecca couldn't see the bottom inch of the screen, which was where there was a menu. And again, this could have only been discovered through prototyping. Like, we could have mocked this table up with cardboard, and we could have inset the screen. We could have sat in a wheelchair, and we could have figured this out. The language selection's also at the top right there, so it was stuck in French, which wasn't great because Becca didn't speak French. That's a really interesting one too. So these headphones for some of the screen content. These headphones get installed into the desk in about a 10-minute job before the show opens. Literally, someone goes around with a drill, drills a hole, puts the headphones in. So that's an incredibly important interface for a user, but is really not thought about a lot. It's done last minute and wherever it looks pretty. So that's quite a great demonstration of how this kind of thinking needs to permeate through not just designers, but your entire team, even the guy with the drill drilling the hole. I think there's a few more bits which we'll run through. So this is like an information stand. Looks fine, but way too close to the car to getting close enough to read it. This was a car on its side. Really popular exhibit because you get to see the underneath a car, which is really interesting for most people. And Rebecca couldn't reach the iPad. In fact, a lot of people under 5'7" couldn't reach the iPad. It was too high. Again, could have found that out through prototyping and doing a bit of UX work in there. And I think we're almost there. Okay, so, and this kind of summed up the video a little bit. So we'll just let this go through. So that's the kicker, really. Not a small audience at all, and an audience which is only getting bigger. Cool. So what was the outcome? The outcome was not quite that. Not far off. Yes. Okay. Outcome. So we started conversations. It proved the value of research immediately, because if you saw the video, you got it straight away. We're setting up some inclusive design workshops, so we're getting an outside consultant in because they tend to carry a bit more weight, and how to install inclusive design and UX in itself into an organisation that's quite large is an expertise. That's a specialty. User research is now viewed equally to market research, whereas market research was very, we all accepted that in the world we live in, but user research now is on an equal par, which is really exciting for my job. And better design in principle has already been incorporated. So the ramp issue sorted. So the Geneva Autoshow just finished. We had a ramp all the way around, solved the problem. So I'm going to move on to my takeaways. So UX buying is never going to be simple. You need to be innovative. So that research, I think, was quite innovative, but the video is really important because in that context, we're talking to designers who have spent a lot of time and effort designing the stand, and you don't want to, for want of a better word, piss them off by pulling out all these flaws. So in an environment like this or a boardroom, if you just go through a PowerPoint of this didn't work, this didn't work, this didn't work, it's not really going to win people on side. By doing the video, which you can see at jamesturner.org.uk, by doing the video, you're letting people watch it in their own time, on their own space, on their own laptop. They can pause it, they can go, oh, that's interesting. So you need to be innovative with how you're delivering this and thinking about your target group and how it's going to get received. That was a big lesson for me. Momentum is really important, so which I found as well. So you show people the video one day, you need to be doing something the next few days afterwards, because people go, oh, that's really interesting, we should change. But unless you start it straight away, people move on to other things and they get bored. And finally, this is just what this is what I did. I used inclusive design because it was relevant to Autoshows. But there's plenty of other approaches which you could do a really similar thing, I think. So yeah, I think that's it. Okay, thanks.